Good evening. I'm Shalamis Hess. Tonight we'll hear from Gila Pfeffer in discussion with Shera Dubitsky about Gila's book, Nearly Departed: Adventures in Loss, Cancer, and Other Inconveniences. I love that title. Aside from being a wife and mom, Gila is a humor writer, breast cancer prevention advocate, and public speaker. Her award-winning memoir has been described, among other things, as life-saving. Gila's writing has appeared in many publications, such as the New York Times, the New Yorker, McSweeney's, Today.com, and Oprah Daily. She lives in New York and London and is an alumna of Stern College. Shera Dubitsky is a therapeutic coach and former director of support services at Sharsheret, the Jewish breast and ovarian cancer community. During the discussion, please enter your questions in the chat. They will be addressed at the end. Welcome, Gila and Shera.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
I'm going to really try not to fangirl here, Gila.
On who?
To you.
All right. I'll
There
I'll
you
try to
are.
do the same.
Okay. So, you know, here it is. This is one of my a few copies that I have. And I actually bought extra copies because I hand it out and lend it to people and have gotten tremendous feedback. So it's called Nearly Departed: Adventures in Lost, Cancer, and Other Inconveniences. And I think that the title is a story, gives the whole story in itself, Gila. But for those who are joining us tonight who are not familiar with the book or your story, can you briefly tell us what the book is about?
Sure. I mean, when people say, "What's your book about?" I keep it short and I say it's about losing both my parents to cancer, me trying not to get cancer, and then what happened when I got cancer anyway. And then depending on their reaction, I either say, "But it's funny," and do jazz hands to let them know like it's going to be okay if they didn't gather that from the title already, or if they look super interested, I'll tell them a bit more about the book. But I look at it as a story of triumph and survival and grit. And actually had an interesting debate with my publisher. It took us many, many, many attempts to get the right title and even more to get the right subtitle. And we had this debate about whether or not to have the word cancer in the subtitle. And I was like, well, I don't want it in there because I don't want it to be pigeonholed as that. And for the purposes of marketing and metadata, she felt it was important. And actually, in the end, I think it is, for better or for worse, an impactful word. But I think the rest of the cover, and certainly the title and the way I worded the subtitle, I hope indicates that this is a humorous book about very difficult things, and that ultimately, I came out the other side okay, and there's a positive message to be taken away.
So just because you brought up cancer, would you say that cancer is a character in your book or more of a B plot, storyline? How would you place
That's such
that?
a you question to ask. That's such a Shiraz question, particularly based on, I heard Shiraz speak on Simchat Torah in Rinat, and she gives an amazing lecture about Goodreads and how that pertains to the story of our lives and how we write the story of our lives. And I took a lot away from that, even though it was Simchat Torah and I couldn't write anything, which was so annoying. But in line with that lecture, I understand the question you're asking, and it's funny again having the word cancer on the cover, and knowing that both my mom, she died very young of cancer, breast cancer at 42. Her mom died of breast and ovarian cancer at 49. My father died of colon cancer at 55. You would think that it played a starring role, but it doesn't. It's not. I don't look at this as a cancer memoir. When I was writing it and we were talking about the marketing with my publisher and the team, we thought about what shelf would this sit on in a bookstore, and it's not on the health and wellness shelf, and it's not on the cancer shelf. It's on the memoir shelf. It's a story. It's a story about something that happened to someone. That someone being me. So I look at cancer as a backdrop against which the story that I tell is told. And the story is, look what happened to my parents. I'm the oldest of 5 kids, and I would like to avoid that happening to me and my siblings. And then ultimately down the road, when I became a parent, future generations. So I look at it as a story of sort of chutzpah. I use the word chutzpah a lot because by all rights and measures, there's lots of cancer in the family, and it looked like it might be coming for me, and how dare I sidestep it? In fact, my original subtitle, when I got an agent, the subtitle that I got an agent with was Outsmarting My Genetic Destiny, which I thought was pretty great. Thank you. Thank you so much. I don't know what anyone else out there thinks of that. But, lots of opinions. Oh, it sounds very sciencey. It's like a genetics book. People are going to think it's, anyway, they didn't want that. But that's really what I felt like I did. I felt like this is what's coming for you. And I used every resource available to me, scientifically, medically, emotionally, support-wise, to circumvent that. So I guess, yeah, no, I don't see cancer as a starring role. I see it as the thing that propels the story forward, but that's not the story.
It's interesting, Gila, because as you're speaking, I'm thinking back to a video that you did for Sharsheret, where you spoke about the moat and the alligator and the castle, and I imagine that people who haven't read the book yet may feel like they're coming into the middle of a conversation with us. So I'm wondering if you could just briefly share a little bit about if you remember the video.
Oh, yes.
And I just want to say here that video has literally saved lives, because people have seen your video on Sharsheret's website. And so, because I feel that starting point about, what you had planned to do is so much of this story, because there really is a lot of generational trauma here. And you wanting to to come up with a different story for your generation, and yet it happened again. And so can you just share a little bit about what you said in that video?
Yeah, I not only do I remember that video, but once in a while someone sends me the link, and it's like, like that meme, like, this you? Yes,
Yeah.
that's me. Um, and full disclosure, I've been a proud partner with and member of and involved with Sharsheret from day one. I was fortunate enough to go to high school with the founder of Sharsheret, Ruchi, or Rochelle Shoretz. So I was in there from day one, and I've been a volunteer, and I've been a recipient of the link program, of the benefits of that. And now I'm a proud ambassador, and I just shout it from the rooftops, not to give anything away, but the last chapter of the book takes place at a Sharsheret benefit, their annual benefit. And, it's me on a stage sharing my story. So it's a very full circle moment. But you're right, people are entering in the middle of the chat. And essentially, having my mom died in 1994, and she was 42 years old. And I watched her suffer for 2 years, and then she died. I don't remember her mother. I was a newborn when her mom passed away. So even though this was a pre-internet age and genetic testing was the furthest, that wasn't a thing. But something in my gut, I was 20 years old when she died, and I was the oldest of 5 kids. The youngest of us was only 3. And something in my, oldest daughter, alpha gut, told me that this was something to be concerned about. This was something that I needed to not only address, but prepare myself for. And so I found myself a breast specialist, and at the age of 20 started going for regular checkups, which is highly unusual for a 20-year-old. But again, there wasn't a lot of other recourse. I didn't have a community to find. Sharsheret was years away from existing, and I was a young person just looking for information. And over, I'd say, the next decade, I got married, had kids. in the middle of that, my mom passed away. Then my dad passed away when I was 30. So by the time I was 30, I was the oldest living member of my entire family. My grandparents were all Holocaust survivors, but by then they had passed as well. And that year that my father died was a real pivotal moment for lots of reasons. That was the year I had my first mammogram. I had to fight for that. I got a lot of, I went to book the appointment, and the receptionist said, we do those at 40. And I was like, I'll be dead at 40. We're doing it now. And that's a very important message in the book, is self-advocacy and agency. And I speak about that quite a lot in the book and in real life. And a lot of things kind of happened at once. So my father passed away. I had my first mammogram. I, within the span of a couple of years, learned about genetic testing, for the BRCA gene, which today rolls off everyone's tongue, but I can assure you at the time it did not, and it wasn't readily available. It's still through Myriad Labs, but at the time it was a very expensive blood test. And there were questions around, even what do the results mean? Can my insurance company drop me? There's a lot of things that are in place today, i.e. insurance companies not being able to do that came as a result of this time that came before it, where people didn't quite know what to do with this information about themselves. And essentially, I tested positive for the BRCA1 gene, which was not surprising to me. I think many people here, and for those who don't know, I will tell you that BRCA, the variations of BRCA, we won't get into the weeds on that, is very common in Ashkenazi Jewish people. The general population has a 1 in 400 chance. Ashkenazi Jews have a 1 in 40 chance. So that's a much higher chance. And what being a carrier means is the carrier has a highly elevated risk of developing breast cancer in their lives. Is it a certainty? No. But when you add up my strong family history, my Ashkenazi Jewishness, and my BRCA, I kind of saw it was coming. And around that time, again, I almost feel like God just put all these really useful tools on my path. Like for 15 years, I had no tools, and all of a sudden it's like, here's all the tools, here's the internet, and here's genetics, and here's information. And a close friend of mine whose mom had and survived breast cancer had this surgery called a preventative double mastectomy, which I'd never heard of before. And without really much other information, I said, I'll take one of those, please. I didn't immediately go on to have that. I did go on to have another kid, so that was our fourth kid. And ultimately, at the age of 34, I say I live in London and New York, but at the time I was still living in the US. And at 34, I underwent a preventative double mastectomy with a reconstruction from my stomach, fat, and muscle, which I like to say, after having 4 kids back to back, was pretty great. It had side benefits as well, and I had plenty to donate to the cause of reconstruction. And it was my mom was diagnosed at 40, so I thought, well, I'm 34. I'm way ahead of schedule here, and this is going to feel like a weight lifted off my shoulders. And it was. I woke up from that surgery feeling light and free and safe, and it was a physical burden that I'd been carrying for decades lifted off my shoulders. And then 6 days later, exactly a week ago, it was Erev Thanksgiving. Everybody was getting ready to sit down to dinner. My surgeon called and said, "You won't believe this. We found early but aggressive cancer in one breast. You saved your own life." So this hypothetical, very out there at the time, drastic procedure of preempting something that may or may not come, where I did get some pushback from people who said, "Are you sure? That seems like a bit, why don't you wait and see?" I'm like, I'm not the wait and see type, and I've already waited and seen my family, so no thanks. It was in a way validating. And I have to tell you that it also, those measures and that diagnosis informed my younger sister's decisions down the line too. So, again, trust me, there's a lot more in the book that's enjoyable. I haven't given it all away. But that really is, I call that waking up from surgery the inciting incident. I originally started writing the book from that moment, but of course I have to take readers up to what took me to that moment. And what I thought would be the end of my story, which is waking up from surgery feeling like I did it, actually was just a new beginning.
Yeah, what's striking to me, Gila, about your book is, I worked at Sharsheret for many years and spoke with probably thousands of women and their family members. And there were things that I read in your book, the details that you talk about things. Like I remember you talking about going into the chemo treatment room and describing the chair, right? And I was thinking that there are just things that you describe in detail and in such a powerful and an impactful way. Like, I could see it the way that you write. I can see it, and yet you also have this fabulous sense of humor. um so I was wondering that you're writing the book, when I was reading it, I was thinking, wow, there's so much that I've learned about this whole journey. I hate journey, but
The
kind
word
of
for it, journey. It should be
right from the
bad.
beginning to the end, right to where you are now. But so I was thinking, like, I wonder if people who are also going through a similar experience were reading the book and nodding their heads, and that there were people who were caregivers who probably were more enlightened as a result of this book.
Sure.
And I'm wondering, who were you writing to when you wrote the book?
First and foremost, I was writing for myself. I had to tell this story, and I'm writing about something that happened. It's now been 17 years since my surgery, thank God, and it was just burning a hole in my brain for all these years. So I was writing not to myself, but for myself. But other than that, I was definitely writing to other people who might have experienced breast cancer in any form, whether it's the earliest stages where they caught it and needed to do nothing else, to stage 4 living with advanced and everything in between, as well as people who might have lost loved ones to breast cancer. And it's interesting, the people I was writing to, as you put it, I ended up hearing a lot of reader feedback, and it was validating to hear that, yes, it landed as I wanted it to land, and
Uh-huh.
it's getting to the people that I want to speak to. But it is very much also for the caregivers or the future caregivers or the support system who may want to know how to show up for somebody, what to do, what not to do, what to say, what not to say. And I have this humorous interlude in the book called, it's written as a list, what not to say to someone going through cancer treatment that people said to me. And it is very much based on actual things that people said to me, all well-meaning, all well-intended. I'm not mad at anyone. But I just as often hear from people who say, I just read your book and a friend of mine was diagnosed with cancer or whatever the disease. And I have to say that hearing you describe it that way not only stopped me from saying the wrong thing, but it gave me insight as to what I could say or how I should behave. And I've heard from women, it's a lot of women, but some men too, who've written to me after the fact to say, thank you so much. Your book got me through a really difficult time. I read it while I was going through chemo, or I brought it into the hospital to have surgery. Some have said, I bought it, but I saved it for afterward. I couldn't read it while I was going through it. Some haven't even read it yet, and they just wanted to let me know that they're not ready for it. All valid. But listen, is my brand of humor going to be for everyone? No. There are different ways of tackling adversity and approaching trauma and things that happen. But I did get the sense that there was enough of a readership out there who would appreciate the humorous touch to, and using humor for what I intended it for. I'm not being flip and I'm not being disrespectful. I'm saying, this is what happened to me. This is how I dealt with it. And maybe this is for you too. So, ultimately, I really wrote it for anyone who needs it. And that may sound vague and like a cop out, but I do mean that. Some people I could envision who might get something from this book, and there are people who, I have yet to even imagine them. What was most surprising to me is, most of the readership is probably millennial Gen X, but I had a healthy amount of Gen Z and Boomer, and not just people in my world, people I know. This thing kind of got out to the edges, very much in the Jewish world, but beyond as well. Where'd Shera go? Shalamis, can we take a question while we're waiting for Shera to get back on?
Sure, sure.
Okay, so I see, is it Hallie?
I was just wondering though, the fact you already had your kids. I mean, a woman much younger with or unmarried, maybe not yet having kids and all that would you, I don't know, would it be wise for her to even attempt to have that the prophylactic type surgery? I mean,
So
I'm not saying it was an easy quote unquote choice for you,
right.
certainly, but to say at least you already had your kids. I mean, I don't know, women getting married, or having children later now, especially.
So it's a good question. And look, first off, I have to say that just like my story is so personal and the way I approach this is personal and the, very outward facing way I share my story and deal with this and speak publicly and, write about it. I'm a public advocate. That's me, but there are plenty of women who are well within their rights to be private and keep it to themselves. By the same token, I would say that there is no one right answer when you find out, when you have a high level of risk through your family history, through being a gene carrier, not just BRCA, but others. There are other options. And while I know that I did the right thing for myself, you bring up an interesting point. Women can go on to have kids afterward. This is not, they wouldn't be able to breastfeed. In fact, two of my sisters went on to have preventative mastectomies and thank God were fine and went on to have 10 kids between them. So it does not actually impact that. And I would recommend anyone here who has, wants to know more about that, contact Sharsheret. They're a phenomenal resource for support and information, and they can certainly guide people through these kinds of decisions and choices. But actually, yeah, that wouldn't be a problem. Did we get Shera back in now?
Can you hear me?
I hear you.
Can you see me? There we go.
Oh, there you are.
Okay. I don't know why I got locked out.
Okay.
But
Well,
I'm
we got
gonna
a
pick
question
up.
in the meantime, so that was good.
I wanted to follow up with something that I'm going to show the book again, because one of the things that strikes me about the title of your book is a memoir. And memories, I think, can be messy, Gila. And so, we remember selectively and emotionally, and sometimes differently from people who lived through an event with us. So I'm wondering, how did you decide which memories earned a place in the book? And what happened if an experience, how you saw it, and how, let's say, your husband or your kids or your siblings saw it, how did you reconcile that for yourself?
That is a wonderful question. And if there are any memoirists joining us today, or aspiring memoirists, or people who have a story they want to tell, you'll either be familiar with this or you'll want to hear at least my take on it. So the first thing, I tell people when they ask me, well, how do you remember it, that that's how it happened? Maybe it was different. I'm like, well, it's a me-moir and not a you-moir. So me memories are, relevant to this story. This is not a historical work. It's not even an autobiography. There's not a lot of fact checking that goes into it. It's me telling a story of how I remember it. What I did do was a lot of research by speaking to witnesses, people who were there, people who knew me in childhood, people who knew my parents, people who were alongside me during the events that I described. There were some things that my siblings remembered differently. And I honored them and did go in and correct them, especially if they pertained to them. My sister Rifki at the time, when my mom passed away, was 10, and I remembered her not being home when we got home from the hospital. And she said, no, I was there, and this is what happened, and this is how that went, because I was so wrapped up in my own universe. I was really, glad to have the record set straight on that front. I did speak to my parents' friends, my mother's closest friends. I've got a lot of insight that, maybe I wasn't ready to hear before, but in the writing of the book, it was nothing earth-shattering, but it was more painting a fuller picture of my parents, particularly my mother, because the book is more about her than my dad. There were things that really informed my writing and my point of view, and just allowed me to deepen my relationship with them even so many years after they were gone. My mom's gone 31 years, my dad's gone 21 years. And look, some of the memories are, filling in the color a bit. So if the memory of the hospital room or the chair, as you say, it was faded, actually, that's not a good example, because I remember that, so I could sketch that with my eyes closed, and it would look, well, like a very bad drawing of what I actually experienced. But those memories stick with me. But you rely also on old photos, on smells, on sounds. You piece it together, and you can paint a picture that's close enough. The important thing is how accurate did I get, the shape of the tile that was in the kitchen. It's more, why am I including this detail? What does this mean to me? What impact, why did that stick with me and not something else? And what do I want the reader to understand about how this thing impacted me? Because, you're a professional clinical psychologist. You know that, what your patients or clients are talking about is not that, it's something else. And I think that's the more important thing. It's not only the what I remember, it's the what am I choosing to share in the story? And also, to answer your question about what went in and what didn't, that's what an editor is for. I worked with the most amazing editor. I don't know if she's on the call. I hope she tunes in. I'll certainly send her the link. Her name is Batya Rosenblum. We're still good friends today. And she not only understood what I was trying to do with the book, and not only comes from a similar background to me, which was helpful because our jumping off point was higher. I didn't have to explain Shiva and hair covering, and how hair covering related to someone who doesn't cover her hair, but now is because she's bald, and like all these complicated conversations that I didn't have to have. But she was also, I thought, really good at reining me in. When you're writing your story, you think every detail is very interesting, and every tangent and every segue is, well, I must tell you, like if you tell a story in real life, sometimes you go off track. And she was relentless with a machete. Out, this, no, it's crawling to a snail's pace here. You don't need this. My original manuscript started from when I was younger, and it was my early years in Staten Island. And my first chapter was called My Staten Island. And it, I thought would be interesting to, a broader, more secular world to know about whatever they know of Staten Island, of the malls and Italians and whatever their impression was, certainly the garbage dump. Here's what my experience as, an insular within an insular within an insular community. Like I was cut off from the 5 boroughs, and I was in this tiny Orthodox insular community in Staten Island. And it was a wonderful upbringing, but she's like, this has nothing to do with your story. Your story starts when you're 18 and you find out your mom has cancer. And she was absolutely right. So having a good editor, and even for people who are self-publishing, which is a very popular route these days, you want to get your book out, sometimes you got to do what you got to do and not let somebody give you that permission. I cannot stress enough the importance of working with some kind of professional or even semi-professional editor who can be very honest about flow, pace, what things sound like, if you want it to be an enjoyable experience for your reader.
So I just want to follow up on something in there, which is that you mentioned the Shadal and Shiva. So how important was it for you to tell your story through the lens of your Jewish identity, and particularly as an Orthodox Jewish woman?
It was very important. And when I wanted to tell this story for so long, and I didn't know how to tell it, and I didn't know anything about book publishing, and I didn't know who to turn to. And although I have, a BA in English Lit from Stern, which has served me well, I didn't do any kind of, I don't have an MFA. And I took a class. It was a 12-week fiction writing class. And I thought, I know, I'm going to tell this story as a fiction. And it's going to be so easy because I already know what happens. And I have all the characters, and I have the whole story arc, and it didn't work. It was terrible, and it didn't ring true. And one thing that I was doing was not making the characters Jewish. I said the story is interesting enough in and of itself. You know, parents die, prevented a mastectomy. Oh my God, cancer. What do I need the Jewish part for? And I didn't know how to, even though I'm a proud Orthodox Jewish woman, Shabbat, kosher, grew up that way, raising our family that way. I didn't know how to talk about that without it becoming a distraction. Like some beautiful books we read are about other cultures, and we're so fascinated and we want to know more about them because they're new to us. Whereas for me, Judaism was, who would that be interesting to outside of our own community? And I wanted to write beyond that community. And it was a close friend of mine she's a veteran of the publishing industry. She's a longtime literary agent, and I befriended her about 7 or 8 years ago. And she changed the trajectory of my writing. She said, first of all, you're leaving half of yourself off the page. You're not being honest. You're not including your authentic self. You're not including your Judaism. I was invited to write an essay for an anthology, and it was about interactions with teenagers. It was parents writing about interactions with teenagers. And I couldn't think of what to write. And she's Irish Catholic, and she's like, well, why don't you write about Shabbat and how you're offline? I'm like, who wants to hear about that? And I ended up writing an essay called TGIF and about the beauty and values of going offline and how, while everyone puts their phones away, you know, the event, the activity is the conversation that happens around Friday night table. And so once she got into my head the fact that the Jewishness is essential to any story that I'll ever tell. Fun fact, I thought I would have a pen name because Gila Pfeffer was a weird name, and it was going to be Zoe Gold. She's like, why? What's with Zoe Gold? That's why would you do that? She goes, let's Google how many Zoe Golds there are. Plenty. She goes, you know how many Gila Pfeffers there are? None. So it's my handle on everything, and no one ever takes it. So it was important to me once I understood that I wanted to be authentic, and that there was so much beauty to be shared if I could tell it in the right way. The Jewishness became important. Fast forward to now, in the world we live in now, it's, you know, a million times more important for obvious reasons. But if you want me to speak to that, I can speak to that too.
Yeah, because look, the emotional experience is universal, right? What you went through is universal. But I think that from a Jewish lens, it obviously adds another layer of texture to your story. And I'm curious, in a post-October 7th world, you know, how have things been going in terms of feedback that you're getting? And, you know, and also I'm wondering, does it impact, you know, your recognition of your book or you being a Jewish writer?
So lucky for me, I'm not a big famous writer, so I haven't had anyone coming for me yet. I finished writing the manuscript, meaning the first draft that I had to get to my editor in July of 2023. So it was pre-October 7th. And we edited it, and we had to have everything done by whatever date it was, but it smack in the middle of all that was October 7th. And again, this is where I got really lucky that my editor is Batya Rosenblum and not, you know, the publishing industry is filled with all kinds of talented people, but there are plenty of them who wouldn't have gotten it, wouldn't have understood why I suddenly couldn't work, couldn't think, wasn't finding anything funny, which is saying a lot for me because I find humor in everything. In fact, we agreed to push off the publication date, which was originally June 2024. We pushed it off by a month to July 2024 because we both said we just need a minute to regroup. We didn't even know what we were dealing with. So I wrote my author bio on my jacket in a post-October 7th world. And I wrote, Gila Pfeffer is a Jewish American author. That's how it begins. And originally, I think it just said Gila Pfeffer is an author, or maybe American, because I lived in London and I wanted to, you know, distinguish the American part because that's the audience that I was writing to. But my stand, the stand that I took, was making that first word Jewish. So whoever picks this book up, it was almost saying, well, you know, I dare you. If you're going to discount this book and you're not interested in the story just because of that one word, this book isn't for you. I have to say, and I'm very online. I'm very on Instagram. Some people here might know that. And the reason I had to do that, I wasn't on public social media before I had to what's called grow a platform, which is, in addition to journey, another horrible word and phrase. But when you are writing memoir and you're an unknown person, you need to prove to a publisher that you can bring a readership in. You've got an audience. So I spend a lot of time sharing, within, with strict boundaries, things about my life or things I find interesting or observations, things about Shabbat. Every Friday, I do this Happy Friday, everybody segment, and people know I'm going to go offline. And over the years, I found a really respectful, curious audience, people who were of other faiths or had no faiths, and really wanted to know more about Judaism. And they would DM me things. I remember one of my longtime followers works in a prison, and she had all kinds of questions about. She's like, we're getting a kosher inmate, and she had questions about how to warm the food on Shabbos. I'm like, oh, whoa, I don't have smicha or anything, but I think you'll be okay if you do this, and this. These are the people that I'm interacting with. And then, when the book came out, there were emails and messages from, Christian readers and otherwise saying, thank you for sharing your morning rituals. They not only were beautiful to read, but, we're incorporating some version of that into our own lives. So I feel really, really fortunate that I don't know if anyone here knows there was this horrible list that some activists put out where, these are the books that are okay to read because they're people who are anti-Zionist. And these are the books that are kind of okay to read because they're neutral. But the people who are, very openly pro-Israel and outwardly, posting things that someone who didn't agree with them might not like, were on some kind of blacklist. And I didn't find my name on that list, but I also I wouldn't have understood how or why that would have happened. Nothing about my book the only kind of activism is pro-health activism and pro-agency activism and, prevention activism. But we are definitely living in complicated times. I don't need to tell anyone that. And the way I was really proud that I decided to write so intimately about certain corners of our Jewish rituals and practice and faith. And I spent a lot of time with some very learned people trying to get those right, because I wasn't trying to preach or proselytize. I was trying to say, this is who I am. This is how I live my life. This is what I do. These are my values. And this is how that factors into my story. And if you want to know about that, you're very welcome to read and ask me questions.
Well, I love that you're, saying that you've heard from so many people, because Gila, I know you and I know your voice, right? And so when I give out your books to people and I lend them out, which I always want to make sure that I get back, because I just love it. One of the things that I hear as people are sharing their feedback to me is that they can hear your voice, and that, that your intent is just so present. And so I love that you were able to write a book where it wasn't that you have to know Gila to get it, right? That so many people get it. And I love, what you were saying, even about somebody in prison, that people just get it. And so, that's really to your credit.
And there is an audiobook. I'm not an audiobook listener. I tune out, but a lot of people like audiobooks, and I did narrate the audiobook. I had to audition for it to narrate my own audiobook, which people find surprising. But to be fair, someone paid for the rights to publish it, and as a narrator, I was paid to narrate it. So I guess if you're paying money, you want to make sure that someone's got a voice that doesn't sound like, Janice from Friends, because that would be pretty grating to listen to a 7-hour audiobook. But so it is my actual voice, but I have heard from anyone who knows me that they hear my voice reading it. And that is because how I sound in real life is how I sound on the page, is how I sound in a text, is how I sound in a voice note. That's my voice. That's the authenticity. I'm not trying to put on airs. And I do find that I have really great connections and personal interactions that way. And again, not that you asked me this question, but I will say that the humor is what allows me to deliver a really difficult message. People hear breast cancer and they still, even today with all the information out there, shut down. It's not a pleasant topic, but I'm here to make it a little bit more fun, because with that fun and with that humor, you get people to take action. So yeah, it is my voice, and anybody here who does, I hope you'll read the book, whether you borrow it from the YU library or you buy it. It's available everywhere. At this point, if you read the book and don't hear my voice, I would find that so weird.
Yeah, and just because you mentioned it, that I do feel that your pacing was remarkable to me in terms of the book, and that you were able to talk about some very emotionally triggering topics, and yet it's so like you can take it in because of your humor, and you do that very well with this emotional roller coaster that you don't even realize that it's happening all at one time. And again, it's something that's very remarkable. But I do want to say this before our conversation needs to end. I could do this for hours.
Girl, same.
But as you mentioned on Simchat Torah, I spoke here in Teaneck, and the title of my shir was, "How would Hashem rate your story on Goodreads?" So I'm asking you, if Hashem had a Goodreads account, Gila, how would you want him to review your story in terms of character development and being able to confront things? How would you want him to review the book?
Because it's very healthy for everyone to pretend that they're speaking for Hashem. I think that is really the way I was raised, to just be presumptuous like that. But for this purposes of this talk and this exercise, first of all, I would hope that he appreciated my attempt to share the beautiful parts of our rich religion and culture and tradition and customs. That I got those right. I know he has a sense of humor. I think I've always felt that Hashem has a sense of humor. I think, what's the Yiddish saying? Man plans and God laughs. Right. So on that basis, I hope that Hashem would be like, wow, this is really funny. Like, that would be great. Booming laughter, thunder, thunder. And I would hope that the character showed tenacity and grit, but also vulnerability, and learned the lessons of, maybe it's not okay, correct to be so tough and strong and I got this, and learn how to ask for help and let your community show up for you, which they did in spades. And this book is also it's a tribute to my friends and family, to my community. It's a tribute to Sharsheret. It's a tribute to my faith and my interaction with my faith. And I would hope that Hashem would think that I honored my parents in writing this book, without them being here to answer my questions or even defend themselves. The hardest part for me to write, when I'm asked the question, what was the hardest part for you to write? People think that it's the cancer part, and it's not. It's, how do I be honest about the steps that my parents didn't take to protect themselves and be preventative? How do I write about that without sounding like I'm criticizing them? How do I write them in a way that honors their memory and demonstrates that it is because of their decisions that I made mine, and I'm here and I'm able to share the story and speak about this, and not to be dramatic about it, but save other lives. And I can say that because I know that people have come up to me and said as much. And of course, this all derives from Hashem. And I would also lastly hope that Hashem knows that all these things that I'm saying really are from him, and I'm the conduit of the vessel. Got to hedge our bets.
Well, I would say, I also don't want to be presumptuous, but I'm thinking he would probably give you a 5-star rating, Gila, because I want to be able to open up our conversation to others.
Yeah.
But I want to say to you, Gila, that your book actually matters. right? And that's what I would tell people. And I think that in the end, it's the power of your narrative, right? You tell it with humor, and the honesty is so sharp, right? And cutting edge. But you also have a heart in how you share your story. And that I hope for everybody who's on the call tonight that you do read the book, because it really is a message of hope and empowerment and solidarity with so many groups of people. And I think that anybody, whether you live through it, whether you're a caregiver, whether you're somebody who's looking for something that is tragic and funny at the same time, this is your book. This is a go-to book. So I really want to highly recommend that.
Hanukkah's just
But I
around the
know,
corner, so that's everyone's gift sorted. So you're welcome for that. And I want to add before we open it to questions that I know we're not going to have time for tons of questions, but I am I'm a findable person. My website is gilapfeffer.com. Message me through there. Instagram at Gila Pfeffer. I am so responsive, and I'm happy to have lengthier conversations with anyone who doesn't get to say anything here tonight. And that's from the bottom of my heart. So please write that down. And with that, I guess I'll say, Shera, thank you.
well, again, I have lists, pages and pages of questions.
We'll do it
So
again next week.
yes, so I encourage people, if you do want to continue this conversation with Gila, you should definitely reach out to her. It's
But now
worth
I
it.
think we've got time for about 10 minutes of questions. Is that right, Shalamis?
Well, Nina Glick raised her hand.
I have two things to say. That's why it's hard for me to write them down. I'm sorry. The first one is that I have experienced this situation from a different standpoint because I had a child who had breast cancer. And I think having a child who has breast cancer is perhaps more painful than having a parent who has breast cancer, not taking away the pain from anyone, but my daughter had stage 4 breast cancer. And believe it or not, she now 20 years later is still alive.
Wow.
So, and to make it even more crazy, she has cerebral palsy and she's in a wheelchair. So, in case Hashem didn't give her enough with the cerebral palsy, he also decided it would be better she had, let her have breast cancer. But anyway, so I do have the same sense of humor, and I do try to understand Hashem's way, and it's sometimes a little bit difficult, but I have to always say to myself, Nina, you're not here to understand. One more question which I have for you, if you don't mind. That was really a statement, but I have a question. How do you have daughters? You have children. You said 4 children.
Sure.
Correct?
Yeah.
Okay. How old are they?
They're ranging from teens to early 20s.
Okay. So for instance, you have a son and he's going to date at some point. And could be, he could be BRCA positive. Correct?
Could be.
Right. So then how does he tell the person that he's getting engaged to that he's BRCA positive?
So I'm going to give this one to Shera, but I do first want to say that thank you for sharing that incredible story about your daughter. She sounds like of another universe. And I do, there is early on in the book, I do write about watching my grandfather lose my mother, and he was a Holocaust survivor. And like, you're absolutely right. It is a completely different thing to have it be your child. And at the funeral, he just kept saying, this is a lo bateva, it's not in nature. So it was very important that you said that. But I'm going to let Shera, based on her experience with Sharsheret and what she does now, answer that question.
Yeah. Nina, it's a great question, and it's something that we've tackled frequently at Sharsheret. I think when Rochelle first started Sharsheret, there was a silence around genetics and cancer. We always hear the joke about the C word, that we have to whisper it, right? And I think when Sharsheret first began, people weren't talking about this. And over time, it's become part of a conversation. And what I would always encourage people to do is to be curious and to ask questions. And that the landscape of probably when Gila's mother got cancer. Also, my mom was diagnosed with cancer with stage 4 cancer when I was young. The landscape is so different today than it was back then. And the ability to be watched and to do screenings and to know your family history is really important. And knowledge is power. And specifically, Nina, to your question, is I once had a woman call Sharsheret saying that their 23-year-old son was just given a shidduch for a girl where there's cancer in the family. And she said, should I go ahead and approve the shidduch? So I said, yes, grab her, because she is going to be watched like a hawk. And the number of phone calls that we get from women in their 20s who don't have a family history and now are getting cancer, we know that there are a lot of things that could come up health-wise for people. So for people where there is BRCA and there is a family history, there's knowledge, and they're going to be watched, and they're going to be under the surveillance of doctors. And so even if somebody has any sort of genetic predisposition, or that they are going, that there are measures, for example, that Gila took, that is available to people. And I'd like to think that, that in the horizon, and maybe not so far off, that people aren't going to have to do prophylactic. I'm hoping that there's something more conventional and that becomes part of mainstream care and standard level of care for people who do carry the genetic thing, right? Medicine is changing. The landscape is changing so quickly. So I would say to be honest about it, to question about it, and I've had people even bring, serious, it's when they were out there dating, that they actually brought somebody to ask questions to a genetic counselor just to get clarifications and just to put it out there. But I think that, in today's day and age, people are being watched. And, Gila, you're a really good example of the story where you changed the trajectory of your family history. So that would be how I would answer that.
But aren't you realize it could also be men that are carriers of BRCA?
For sure. And so it was still
not going to be tested. I mean, most people assume BRCA comes with the women, but a man can be a carrier of BRCA also.
For sure. And absolutely. And that's why, we encourage all people, particularly people in their 20s, to find out their family histories, and to have these kind of discussions with their family about should they test, right? Like, I think, Nina, that there are men out there who say, well, I don't need to test because, I'm a man. But we want to encourage that anybody who has a strong family history to go ahead and test, because the more you know about your history, and the more you know about your own status, the better off you are to protect your history, your health, and the health of the future generations in your family.
Thank you. The situation can be, the conversation, Shera, could be continued in Lazy Bean.
Yes.
Here, I think we have time for one more question.
There's one in the chat. Where do you
test? You have it. Yeah.
Yeah, where do you test specifically in Bergen County? So it's really interesting that out of this talk about the whole story, there is, to Nina's point, there is a desire for more information and more access, and it is becoming a lot more common to test. And there's also, I'm sure you can answer that in a second, the where to test, something called, is it called pre-implantation genetic testing or genetic screening, where I know of several couples who have eliminated BRCA from their lineage altogether by, creating embryos and going forward with the ones that don't have BRCA. So there are lots of ways to tackle this issue, and constantly new ones coming up. And we have a lot of organizations who offer, not only support, but practical advice. For instance, this person wants to know where to get tested in Bergen County. Shera, you want to answer that? And somebody
Yeah, I'm just going to
had one
answer
more
very
question.
quickly because, again, I want to focus more on your story. But I want to say this before, you're swabbed or blood tested or anything, call Sharsheret and speak to the genetic counselor there. And it's free and it's personalized, and you can get a whole family on at one time. So before you even get to the step of testing, I definitely feel like you should get as much information as you can about what it would even mean to test, and to have that kind of candid conversation and tailored conversation with a genetic counselor. So call Sharsheret and they can answer all those kind of specific questions.
Yes, absolutely. And with that, we're going to kick it over to Shalamis.
Okay. Those of you who had questions that were not answered, please feel free to email Gila. Do you want to write your email in the chat?
Sure, I will do that right now to everyone. Gila writes at gmail.com, and my website is gilapfeffer.com. Find me. I'm right here.
Thank
Gila,
you
I just
so-
want to wrap this up on where we can kind of weave in the questions and the conversation, that I feel like your story and your having written the book really reframes this experience from a victimhood or, fate, maybe because of genetics or whatever. But I think that writing the book is a wonderful example of a call to action. And whether you have questions about your own family history, it's a call to action. Whether you went through something and you're still inside the story, there's a call to action that's available. And if you're a caregiver, and this book can be your call to action and to know how to take the next steps. And I think that that's a really important thing to also put out there.
There's something for everyone.
Yeah.
Literally. So thank you. And just really thank you everyone for taking time on a Monday night to be here. I run a campaign every month called Feel It on the First, where I use humor to promote breast cancer prevention. And today is the first, so I'm triply excited that this is the date that it fell out on. And like I said, the fact that you've tuned in means that you're already interested in being proactive and preventative, or maybe you just like hearing about good empowering Jewish stories. But thank you for being here. Thank you, Shalamis, for inviting me, and thank you, JB, for keeping everything running smoothly. And thank you to my alma mater. When did I graduate? 1995? Yeah, and here I am, Stern Girl, on the Zoom.
Who would have thought?
It's Shera. And thank you, Shera. Really, thank you, Shera, for agreeing to do this and making the time. And I know that you and I can chat for hours and hours and hours, but we don't always do it in front of so many people. So,
which is probably a good thing.
Listen, I'll take anything I can get from you. And thank you, everybody, so much. And this will be recorded and available on YouTube.
It's going to be sent to everybody who registered, and it's going to also be on YouTube.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Great.
And of course, I'll send it to you directly.
All right.
So thank you, everyone. Thank you, both of you, for a wonderful discussion. We have a lot of nice emoticons or whatever they're called.
Yeah, everyone's showing off their tech savvy. Well done. Good night, and everyone have a very happy Hanukkah.